Hello everyone, my name is Isabel Stewart and I'm part of the Wave Organisation's Trauma Education team. The plan is to do a series of short videos on two topics that are interconnected and interrelated. And those two topics are number one, trauma, and number two, resilience. But I'm going to do a sort of reframe on how we look at those two particular topics. I'm going to look at trauma more through the lens of the neurobiology and how that impacts us as human beings and affects our behaviour, and look at resilience through the lens of integrative and systems approach. So in each series, the videos will build on the previous, a bit like a jigsaw puzzle, creating the bigger picture. But today, I'm going to present the first video in the trauma series, and it's on the brain, which the neuroscientists would refer to as the super system of super systems, and I tend to agree with them on that. So if you bear with me, I'm going to bring up a very simplistic diagram of the brain and explain it in terms of trauma, threat, and stress. So as you can see, this is a very simple diagram of the brain, and neuroscientists say we are built from the bottom up. So I will start at the bottom of the diagram, but as you can see, we have sort of three brains, and it's often called the triune brain. So this is the first part of the brain to develop. It's the only part of the brain we're born with, intact and online at birth. Now, the brain has hundreds of functions, but we know its two most important functions are number one, to ensure our survival as individuals, and number two, to ensure the survival of the species through procreation. So survival is very important, and this part of the brain is really deep inside, so it shows you how important it actually is. It is extremely ancient, and they reckon at least 50 million years old, and it hasn't changed very much in all that time. And that's basically because it is so efficient. It does what it says in the tin, so it hasn't needed to change very much. It is extremely fast. It reacts very fast, but it tends to be very black and white, very simple. It contains our vital centers, or what sometimes is referred to as vegetative functions. So it contains our heart center, our respiratory center. It is responsible for the control of our body temperature. It's involved in appetite, and it's certainly very involved in sleep. Sleep is hugely important, and in the talks on resilience, I will labour a bit on the subject of sleep. It's very important, and I call it like a superpower. So it's very important. And if you think in terms of stress, threat, trauma, and even in a lot of mental health conditions, those functions are definitely impacted. Our sleeping, our eating, our breathing, and our heart rate, depending on the situation. So next to develop in evolutionary terms and in biological terms is our mammalian, or our emotional brain, known as our emotional brain. And they say it's fully realized by the age of 6, and it is the seat of our emotions. And the point of that is that it adds color to our perceptions, both internal and external. It adds more information, and motion just means energy in motion. So basically, we either move to something or we move away. It is not as fast as the reptilian brain, but it is pretty fast. Now, these two parts of the brain, all parts of the brain work closely together. They all work together. So last but not least to develop is what is called the human, the thinking or the cognitive brain. So it is this part of the brain that distinguishes us from other mammals. It is not as fast as the mammalian and the reptilian brain. It tends to respond more than react. It is very sophisticated. It adds more information. It's like the CEO of an organization, like the executive brain. It oversees things, weighs things up. It's involved in language. It's a bit like the captain of a ship. So it is hugely important. So as I said, all these parts of the brain work together. But when we perceive threat or stress or trauma, it is these two parts of the brain, the reptilian and the mammalian brain, that sort of become front and center. They step forward, they up the ante, basically in order to try to ensure our survival. So that's like a rapid tour of the brain and the nervous system. And if we think in terms of what's happening today with the COVID virus, there would not be a person in the world that their reptilian brain and their mammalian brain has not upped the ante, is literally taking more notice. So next week, I'm going to talk about some of the responses and reactions in terms of trauma and threat. Thank you very much. Bye bye. See you next week. Thank you.